Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Right as I hit start stream, I accidentally muted myself. So there was like a half second between when I hit go and then the mad panic in my eyes as I went to go and hit the unmute button so I could then begin talking. It was confusing, it was anxiety provoking, and now it's out of me and it's in your brains. So
and that is what you get for starting the show with about 2 seconds warning. Tom was still bringing up the article.
Yeah, I was bringing up the articles, and you're like, "Oh, so we're going to do this, then this. That cool with you guys? Great." Recording in 3, and I'm like,
3, 2, 1.
What's happening? Like, I was getting them in order, so I guess I'm not throwing to anything because I don't remember the order.
It's the level of professionalism that you experience with this show is unparalleled. As long as the parallel is something that is
0.
Yeah,
it's a 0. It's a baseline of 0. Yeah. Speaking of not good, our first story this week is going over to the United States, and the current FBI director, Chris Wray, is going to resign, and that's following, obviously, the Trump nomination of Kash Patel.
So, less of a resignation, more of an acknowledgement of facts. Chris Wray was appointed FBI director in 2017 by Donald Trump after he shit-canned tall glass of water James Comey. But obviously Chris Wray, as head of the FBI, has been instrumental in various investigations of Donald Trump because he is a criminal. And Donald Trump, as a criminal, doesn't like being investigated and has taken it rather personally. So particularly with regard to the documents case, keeping a bunch of top secret nuclear documents at Mar-a-Lago in a toilet, not actually super kosher. And he blames, it's one of those things where it's like, you blame the guy, but you're the one who's at fault. You're the one who's done the wrong thing. It's like, oh, I'm so angry at this cop for pulling me over. It's like, well, you were doing a bong hit at 200 kilometers an hour on the Eastern Freeway, so it is kind of your fault that you're getting pulled over. It's not the cop's fault.
George, I'm sorry. I thought this was America.
I'm sorry. I thought this was America.
I thought you could rip bongs and keep nuclear codes in any location because freedom. They fought a war over it.
Bongs and codes. So he's decided that he's going to be stepping down in January. And Trump,
you can't replace me. I quit.
Yeah, I quit, but only in January. The intent Donald Trump has signaled his intent to replace him with duffel bag of shit, Kash Patel, who you will be unsurprised to learn has no experience and is demonstrably unqualified for the role of running the largest law enforcement agency in the world, presumably.
And his profile photo looks like he knows it.
Sorry, second.
Like the picture that they have of him whenever they're referring to this nomination, it looks like he knows.
Oh yeah. He's like, he looks like wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, like he's just done a line of Adderall, and he is fully unprepared for the job of running the world's largest law enforcement agency. So he's been on record previously saying, like, what are those bloody 7,000 people doing in Washington working in the FBI building? Day one, I'm going to go in there and shut that building down and send them out in the country to be cops. Your cops, go be cops. Like, go arrest people for rape or whatever. And it's like, first of all, the FBI doesn't handle rape, Kash, which you should know, seeing as you're going to be running the FBI. But second of all, like, being one of the largest law enforcement bodies in the world would necessitate having 7,000 people in Washington because they're the ones telling all the branches out in the country what to do and coordinating all of those efforts. Like, it is entirely necessary for those, like, to have a head office, because otherwise, who's organizing all the branches to go and do stuff and arrest people? And it's not like, like global terrorism organization, anti-terrorism, stuff needs to be coordinated. You can't just have like the Georgia FBI office going off on their own to investigate terrorism. It's just like that is a thing that needs to be organized.
That's the theme, though, of course, with the Trump administration there is this sort of general concept that somehow if you reduce the workforce by half, by a quarter, by all of it, that somehow government will still function, which is a bit of a myth.
Cheaper.
But cheaper.
It'll be cheaper and it'll work. Still, we hope.
I don't know. It's one of these things where they're just like, they're like, oh, we'll just find a lot of efficiencies through AI. We'll get Microsoft Copilot to come in and just run everything. Yeah. You're like, okay.
Hey, dear Grok, they'll be using Grok because they've hired Elon, right? Like, they can't use any of the others. Like, dear Grok, how make FBI cheap?
The Copilot can't tell me how many R's there are in the word reference, but it's going to, fix Washington. That's okay.
There's a crazy reason for that, but let's not get bogged down in it.
So it's bad, and Kash Patel is bad. The thing that
I'm kind of here with popcorn, though. I'm kind of here like I just want to see what's going to happen
in the final season of America. Yeah. It's interesting because most of the whole thing with the Department of Government Efficiency is it's so nonsensical because the vast majority of what the government does isn't you could fire every government employee in the country and it still wouldn't cut the $2 trillion of the $6 trillion budget that they're wanting to cut, because the vast majority of what the American government does is not really hire people. It's more just direct cash transfers to programs like Medicare and Medicaid and transferring money to various departments like the Pentagon in order to be able to, facilitate the US military industrial complex. It's a complicated system but essentially the federal government is not the largest, the workforce there is massive, obviously, but it's not the largest line item in terms of the budget. A lot of it is just sending checks to places to have programs and things work and keep going. And so if you just cut all of that, then the government doesn't work no more, because the people doing things and paying people and sending VA benefits and all that, that stuff just doesn't happen. So you can cut 7,000 employees from the FBI, but that's again, that's going to be a tiny fraction of a percentage of a line. You're not going to get to $2 trillion that way. Is my point.
What I'm hearing, George, is that they shouldn't be cutting, okay, so it's not like they're just going to be determining how efficient any particular individual is and firing them or keeping them, based on that result. They should just stop sending the checks. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, you joke, but that is literally the argument. That is literally the argument that they are making is yes, Congress has the power of the purse strings, and it's Congress's job to appropriate money. Yeah, but what the Trump administration is arguing is well, we're the executive, we don't need to send the checks. Just because they've been appropriated by Congress for these purposes doesn't mean we need to spend the money. So we're just going to stop sending checks. That's basically, you're joking, but that is the thing that they are trying to do.
I'm a moron who doesn't understand how this works, and that's what they want to do.
Yeah, well, Tom, it would it would please you to know that you're a moron who has as much financial acumen as Elon Musk, because that is essentially what they're arguing. One thing that was astounding to me this week is that they were talking about I think it was the Federal Reserve or the FDIC, one of those finance bureaus. They're we're going to stop sending money to the Federal Reserve, and everyone was the Federal Reserve isn't actually paid for by taxpayers. It's a premium that's charged on banks in America. The federal government is actually not involved with funding that body at all. That's not a thing that we do.
You saying you're not going to fund them anything, give them anything is currently what you are doing.
That is the status quo.
That's right.
It just betrays and an astounding weapons grade level ignorance about the task that they're trying to undertake. It's just extremely regrettable, I think, is an understatement. But
I think I'm with you, Adam, in the sense of I'm here with the popcorn just to see the bumbling chaos that's going to ensue. But then also it probably might result in some very real deaths of people who don't deserve it at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, and that really takes the shine off the Schadenfreude.
It's not good for us either. If Trump gets his way with tariffs and with mass deportations, it's going to fuck the global economy, And that is going to have negative
Mm-hmm.
impact on us here in Australia and our inflation situation and how soon they start cutting rates here. And it's not just
our inflatulation. No.
In what?
I was trying to our inflation situation. Would that be our inflatuation?
But Tom, I appreciate you coming in and trying to make jokes, but I'm actually trying to make a serious point here. If you could just take a breath and just wait till the end for your fart jokes, and if you could just wait patiently.
Tom, I actually quite enjoyed the fart joke. I'm going to give you 10 points.
Well, overruled. What can I say? 2/3 majority rules, and this is why democracy sucks. So it's bad. It's bad, and it's going to be bad for us here as well. So yes, I empathize with the whole idea of just sit back with the popcorn and watch it all burn down. But as you say, Tom, there are going to be very real impacts on very real people in their lives. And those people might be us as well. The world in general has gotten just a couple of percentage points worse than it was on November 5th.
So maybe get the popcorn, maybe also get a bottle of whiskey and buy a lot of toilet paper.
Way ahead of you there, buddy.
Just in case.
Doused in whiskey. So let's freaking go.
Speaking of all things that are terrible and one of the FBI's jobs that it won't be able to do with no workforce, and that's basically cybersecurity in the US. So there's obviously various agencies that deal with cybersecurity in the United States.
Are you telling me the Philadelphia field office in the FBI can't just handle cybersecurity all by themselves?
No, it turns out it's a nationwide problem quite often when there's state actors involved. I
was just thinking basically the Albany field office maybe could deal with it. They seem like they're a bit light on at the moment.
Yeah,
so
maybe call some guys up from Missouri or something. I'm sure they've got not much going on down there.
South Dakota is basically, there's 3 people and a couple of cows in South Dakota. It's basically empty. So we could do something in there, I reckon.
Yep. So there was a joint statement released by the FBI and the US cyber watchdog agency CISA, which that does stand for something, and I can't remember what it is. And basically they said that a number of, pretty much all the major telecoms in the United States have been hacked by the Chinese hacking group Salt Typhoon.
Cool name.
And lots of like when we say a lot, we're talking probably hundreds of millions is kind of what I'm gathering here.
That's most
Americans. Most Americans' metadata phone records have been stolen.
Even down to if for some particularly powerful or famous figures, actual audio files and text files from messages they've sent over the network is included in that data breach. And the thing that's most concerning to me is that basically there's no that it still hasn't been resolved. So there's what they've said is they haven't managed to, even now that all of this has come to light and this is public knowledge, they still haven't managed to fully remove Chinese actors from these networks. And so there's a risk, quote, the risk of ongoing compromise to communications until US companies address the cybersecurity gaps. The Chinese are likely to maintain their access, unquote. And that's from the Deputy National Security Advisor. So basically the security apparatus in the United States has said the Chinese have fully penetrated our networks and they're still in there and we can't get them out. Good luck.
Yeah, wow.
And the best part about it is, I guess for some of these politicians and stuff, the government's gone through and sort of told people, what's been stolen and that you've been hacked and yada, yada, yada. But for most Americans, they've sort of said, well, we don't really want, the government's basically said, well, that's the telecom's responsibility to notify customers. And so most Americans haven't even been told that this has happened.
I mean, realistically, no. You know what's crazy about this is that for the first time ever, the recommendation from government officials has been to use encrypted messaging apps like Signal. It's the first time ever that the American government has advocated for the use of these technologies because as it currently stands, if you are an American citizen and you are using a phone, that is not a secure communication. So the blanket recommendation is if you're a person, you should be using encryption technology because your data is not secure, actively insecure right now.
Does it Does it expand beyond just like text messaging and calling and things like that, or is it mobile data? Like,
well, they said
anything
metadata,
you
so that could include
internet-wise on your phone.
That could include location data. That could include times and dates and places of calls. It's specific, like in some circumstances, the content of calls and messages. So yeah, it's like an astounding amount of information and detail to have. And I guess this is what maybe prompted some of the concerns earlier this year that the American Congress had with regards to TikTok. Is basically talking about how this is just like another layer of like the amount of information a Chinese company is able to obtain from American users, and that's very concerning. But they had closed door sessions as to what the actual content of those warnings were. So we the public still don't know the breadth and depth of their concerns with regards to just TikTok. And then there was also a secure briefing that happened with all of the US senators, I think it was this week or recently, where they had a further briefing on this cybersecurity attack, and basically senators are getting out there going, we can't tell you what happened, but we are freaking out. it is the time for us to crack open each other's heads and feast on the goo inside. It is bad right now. So Senator Mark Warner, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said this was the worst telecom hack in our nation's history by far.
It's like if Optus, although Optus also included passwords and credit card details and stuff, didn't it? As opposed to this is just metadata, I believe.
Yeah, no, the Optus situation, I don't think they didn't get access to anything like call logs and all that sort of stuff. That was customers' PII, personally identifiable information. So it was their addresses and emails and stuff, licenses and stuff, because they just could get to customer accounts. But I don't think it was the metadata.
But so you can do a lot with metadata. Like if you know a particular account is a journalist, and this number has been calling this number over in China, or has been speaking to XYZ whistleblowers or sources or whatever, you can actively clamp down on
you can make a map.
Espionage activity. You can create a map of influence and awareness. It is very, very concerning for what it means for America's intelligence security, but also just general information security as a nation. And we had a similar breach here in Australia, which was reported on in July, I think it was, where there's credible information that groups like, I think it was called APT40, which is a Chinese hacking group, are again embedded in Australian networks, able to access untold levels of data. Who knows exactly what's going on there? So it's not just a uniquely American problem. This is a problem that is happening here in Australia as well. So
but of course, if we ask the Chinese have been, the people have asked hey, the Chinese government, what do you think about this? And they've repeatedly denied claims that the claims have been put forward, and they have said, for quite some time, the US side has been floating all sorts of disinformation about threats of Chinese hackers to serve its own geopolitical purposes. China firmly
and I mean constantly. They are constantly accusing us. And I mean all the time, every day, constantly accusing us of penetrating, their telecom networks. And I mean constantly they're accusing us.
Yeah, we don't know who hacked the US telecom service, but whoever those handsome bastards are, they're those handsome, clever, very, very
just big
powerful, just phenomenally talented, handsome jerks. Whoever they are. Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah, they're great.
Man, if we ever find those guys.
They did say China firmly opposes and combats all kinds of cyber attacks. Now, Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon, look, they're Chinese-based. They are believed to be connected to the People's Republic of China.
But that's how these organizations run. They're called cutouts. It's an arm's length organization. The government provides money. You go into a separate building across the street from the Chinese government building called Nondescript Arm's Length Organization away from the Chinese government, and you work at Nondescript Organization LLC, and that is not associated with the Chinese government, but the Chinese government is fully aware and approves and pays for probably all the things that you're doing in that arm's length organization in that building across the street. That's how these things work, right?
So they're basically the Bureau of Meteorology, which I believe has also been hacked by some sort of Chinese threat actor in the past. But anyway.
Hell yeah, they're going to know the weather.
So you can look these up as, there's, for instance, you just Google Sol Typhoon. There's a few references there, but it basically the way they got in was by exploiting firewalls. I think in terms of how they got into some of these networks.
Unfortunately, my password was password, so I might have let the team down there. I don't know if that's.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting actually.
It's just one guy didn't have two-factor authentication turned on, and that was it.
If you replace the S's in password with fives or maybe the dollar
sign, there you go.
Would have been way more secure.
Super secure.
So, just for next time, George.
You've got to use a passphrase, guys. It's all about using a passphrase. So it's a word, but it's great, mate, but spelt with 8s. That's how you get around it with an exclamation mark. So yeah, look, I mean, there's been a lot of news at the moment in terms of the cyber front. Like Microsoft are basically saying they're going to have to reset like 1 billion people's passwords, and that they're trying to get people away from just having password protection, basically enforcing multi-factor on various devices. So there's all this, and there's also like a bunch of updates they pushed which had a bunch of 0-day vulnerabilities on them as well, and they're like, don't install the update, wait a minute. So there's it's a lot happening in the space at the moment, and there will continue to be. For me personally, it makes me question, like, I don't really trust the Australian government with a lot of my PII, but like there is a push at the moment in Australia, for instance, to use your digital identity as the primary means of identifying yourself when accessing government services.
Yeah, I don't love
that. Now, they seem to think it's very secure, and, for instance, I've got extra security on my tax account, for instance, which the tax department won't remove because of some previous nefarious things that have happened to it. But they did say, the way around it is you have to sign up to the digital identity. And I'm like, wow, look, like obviously they've got a lot of faith in it, which is great. But I don't know, I'm still, given the amount of stuff that's happening in the cyberspace, I'm just going to hold off.
Younger listeners might remember several years ago the My Health record.
Yeah, the My Health record.
And people were like massively freaked out by this level of government intervention. There was a whole like grassroots media campaign about here's how you opt out of the My Digital Health record. And government's going to have me bloody information. I don't fucking think so, buddy. No government's going to have my fucking information. And then 10 years later, everyone's like, and you just scan your face in here and that'll make your passport check in 3 seconds faster. And everyone's like, yep, right here then. Yep, great, easy. Biometrics, digital identifiers, no worries. Before people freaking out over the idea of a national identity card, they're like, fucking government's got to come take your fucking face. No, don't fucking do it. Opt out. And now they're like, if you just scan your retina and your asshole over here, then you just enter your blood type and your DNA sample, and we'll be able to let you in the country. It's easy as.
And to be clear, I haven't got any sort of evidence to say that there'd be anything wrong with the MyGov digital identity. But
I have a background.
What's happening in the world?
Concern.
I'm concerned.
Yes, I have a background, like purely baseless, just a background radiation level, low grade burning concern whenever any of my biometrics or any of those things are digitized and then stored by a government agency. Like that, as a rule, concerns me for various reasons. Now, is it any better than, Face ID, which is then authenticated, and presumably stored somewhere on an Apple server? Like, I mean, sure, it's probably like in an encrypted form or whatever, but no. Is it better that it goes to a corporation as opposed to the Australian government? But anything that's digitized becomes hackable, right? So to a certain extent.
My understanding of the biometric stuff when it comes to your phone, I could be completely wrong on this, so if I find out that I am wrong, I'll issue a correction. But I thought how
that it's
a lot of that
locally.
worked. Well, that the actual biometric aspect is stored locally to create, at least this is how it works on Samsung stuff. I assume Apple has a similar thing. They've actually got a physical chip in your phone that acts as like the security breach notifier. And if it's ever tripped, it can never be untripped. So it acts as has this phone ever been breached? And all the biometric stuff is all handled and processed locally and creates a token. And that token is validated by
I guess my broader point
cloud
is that
service or something. So you don't send your fingerprint to Samsung, is my understanding, but it's more like Samsung wants a pass token that comes from this algorithmic process that's local, and it will only issue it if the fingerprint that I have registered with it is what is.
Sure. I guess my broader point is that we entrust a lot of information to like random third-party corporations for the benefit of like being able to like stream music or whatever. Like there's a terrifying amount of metadata, you know, regardless of whether it's your biometrics or not. There is a shitload of information based on your search history, based on your meta, you know, where you are when you
GPS history,
or GPS history, all that sort of stuff that we willingly surrender to corporations on a day-to-day basis without even so much as glancing at the terms and conditions, being mildly infuriated when I'm obliged to scroll to the bottom and then pretend as though I've read it. You know, like we sacrifice a lot of data to non-governmental organizations on a day-to-day basis for the smallest modicum of convenience. So the idea that, you know, shouldn't I be equally as circumspect with those violations of my privacy as I am with the government I don't know. It's like, I suppose it's six of one, half a dozen of the other, but like, I just don't like, I'm very concerned with all of this data that's getting out there and the fact that basically government and corporations in Australia and America are just the Spider-Man gif of everyone just like pointing at the other one, just being like, no, you're the one who's supposed to,
you're the responsible
one that's meant to sort this out. And meanwhile, you know, there's a whole, you know, digital clone of me over at, you know, Communist Party headquarters telling of my deepest thoughts and feelings. Like it just doesn't seem like it's trending.
I mean, they could. I mean, yeah, but this is the other thing now is that like we as doing a podcast, there is a lot of information of ours in recorded form online, which could have a translator run through it very quickly and have all the data pulled out of where we've lived, and you know, and they could imitate our voices. Like there's probably enough.
For one, love that the Chinese Communist Party are doing that. Personally, big fan of them and all of their work, and I would just like to say, no red flags here. You know, love them and their works, and certainly don't have any objections to them as an organization. So.
Yeah. I mean, I have a digital driver's license as well as the physical one. I've got one of those. So
yeah, I don't know why it hits different.
That did make me go like, oh, hang on.
Yeah.
But I
Wait
think
a minute.
Right, if someone gets my phone, it's rather than because like the fucking agency that issued me the digital driver's license is the one that issued me the physical one. Like those cunts know all that detail.
Yeah.
Like they have my driver's license number. They fucking gave it to me. Yeah. So it's not like I've given them something that they don't already have. But it's more the whole, hey, don't hand an unlocked phone to a cop.
Well, yeah, and I remember reading when someone was talking about traveling to places abroad for reporting, you know, developing countries and things with, you know, places with authoritarian governments and things like that. Basically, their recommendation was to not have biometrics enabled on your phone because, they could force you to open your phone and have access to all your stuff. To basically, if you're traveling to a war zone or something like that, you take a phone with you that's not your actual phone, and you just load the bare minimum of what you need to operate in the foreign country, and you lock it with a passcode that they can't make you put in. Because if it's a Face ID, all they need to do is hold the phone up to your face, and they're in your phone, and they have access to everything you've ever seen or done.
Chop your finger off, away you go.
Yeah. No, there are features you can enable. I know Samsung's got one at least that's like a security setting that disables all biometrics until the passcode's been put in it again.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So it's like,
Tom, are you shilling for Samsung? Is that what's happening right now? Because you mentioned them twice.
That I know.
It's just the superior platform, George. I don't know what you this Apple.
It's open source. No,
oranges. Like, what is this brand? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think you have to know in advance that you need to activate it, right? So it's like, going into an authoritarian country or something if that's what you like to do of a weekend. But you know, it's not so useful if you have been in an accident and are knocked unconscious.
Yes,
I know people are worried about like, paramedics or.
But I don't think it's inconceivable to see something like that happening here, where if you're arrested for protesting or something like that, and the cops, say, "Hey, give us your face," and we're in your phone, and they can see who you've been speaking with, who you've been dealing with. Like, I don't think it's inconceivable that something like that could and would happen here if given the chance, right? So.
If you've watched any of Homeland, always bring a burner. And I do wonder whether or not the UnitedHealthcare's alleged murderer, like UnitedHealthcare's CEO's alleged murderer, had a burner himself because he seems to have been very organised. So last week we reported that the UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson had been murdered, and that the internet had imploded at the news of this, and the rising of the lower class to remove the wealthy elite had in fact begun.
But
people were sharpening the guillotines. It seemed like on the internet.
On the internet, not in real life, just on the internet, because it's a safe place to be. But they have now found the alleged killer.
They've arrested a suspect. They've arrested someone who they have charged with the murder.
Yes.
And you said, Adam, that when the murder happened, the internet imploded. But then they found this man, and then the internet exploded because he is cute, according to a lot of people.
Is he? He is. How do we say the name?
Luigi.
Attractive.
Luigi Mangione. That's one spicy accused assassin. So,
and he has a monobrow. So how is that?
No, Adam. He is incredibly fuckable. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's got a monobrow.
I would describe myself. I would describe myself as a mostly straight person, right? I would say I'm like on the Kinsey scale. I'm probably like a 1. Okay, 1 is 0 being totally straight, 6 being totally gay. I'm 1. I'm mostly straight, but every now and then I see a Luigi like this, and I go, "That's a spicy meatball." He is an objectively hot guy.
He's a handsome man.
Shredded abs.
Abs for days.
Very fuckable.
Why are we seeing his ad? I was on his social media profile.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So Luigi, 26, has been charged with murder after UnitedHealthcare executive Brian Thompson was murdered in New York. He was found in a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. They received an anonymous tip from an elderly gentleman at the McDonald's who said, "I saw UnitedHealthcare assassin Luigi ordering some fries. Most beautiful fries you've ever seen." Apparently.
It wasn't Donald Trump, though.
No, are you sure? They just said it was an elderly man working in a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, so I just assumed it was him.
I thought it was a customer.
A
customer recognized him from pictures on the news.
Yeah.
And told a staff member, and a staff member called the cops in. So I know, Adam, you mentioned, you said like, it was clearly very planned and all that sort of stuff. The assassination, carving words into the bullet casings and leaving a backpack full of Monopoly money and all that.
Yeah, some real Riddler shit going on there.
But I would argue maybe not so much well planned when, apparently when they arrested. When they came to arrest Luigi, that he was.
I can say that, by the way.
They say they found.
I cannot.
They say they found on him in his backpack, like a 3D printed firearm, a handwritten manifesto, with motivations to the crime, and I think the ID used by the lead suspect to check into the hostel.
Yeah.
Luigi,
my guy, you get rid of that shit.
Step 3 is you get rid of that shit.
Yeah,
well, that kind of leads me to think that I don't think he was necessarily really trying to escape. I think you kind of want to get found if you're still running around with a 3D gun that you used.
How long was he sitting in the Macca's then? Was he like, come on, someone
sitting there with his hoodie,
notice me, senpai,
smiling at various passerbys with the smile that he had in the photograph. Yeah.
Allegedly, though, he was not a customer of UnitedHealthcare. That's what I've heard.
Well, that's what that's the allegation that's been made in
this is where information
article
coming thick and fast.
So, it does mention that Luigi has suffered from chronic back pain that affected his daily life, according to friends and social media posts. So he was in Hawaii, had some kind of incident when he's like a slip and fall, and then lots of different, sort of, back surgeries and things like that. On Friday, UnitedHealthcare spokesperson says it does not have prior records for either Mr. Mangione or his mother. I think she also had like a lot of interactions with the healthcare industry after some illness. Comes from a very wealthy family. So it's not, his family owns and runs clubs and resorts and things like that. So it's not, his cousin is like a representative congressman for like a state representative or something like that. So, it's kind of revealing, sort of revealing who this guy is has kind of exposed a bit of a more complicated portrait than I think the one that people had in their heads of like a Mr. Robot style, like anti-capitalist. He followed a lot of like
the public's perception was like incredibly probably wrong. Is that what you're saying, George?
And believe it or not, the internet sleuths weren't on top of it immediately. So he followed a lot of like some right-wing influences, so Jordan B. Peterson and that sort of stuff. He seems to be like he worked in tech, so he's had some kind of like tech libertarian leanings as well. So the idea of like anarchist daddy that people have sort of put together surrounding this guy doesn't quite sort of match up with the reality. Like everyone, he was a human and he was complicated and he's complicated and has more going on than you might expect. But there was some excerpts from the manifesto that were released. People talking about and basically he's acknowledging the complexity of the healthcare system and how flawed it is. But he also says things like, but I'm not the best placed person to like describe this in detail. And like, he's kind of like admitting that he's, isn't an expert, I guess, on healthcare policy in America, and isn't like the best placed person to sort of deconstruct it for the masses. So
he's not Karl Marx, basically. He's not.
It didn't seem to me. It did not. It was interesting actually to hear how some of the media described it as like an unhinged manifesto from a fucking crazy person who's so fucking crazy. We're not going to show you the manifesto and what's in it, but trust us when I say it's fucking crazy and he's crazy. And then Ken Klippenstein, who's an independent journalist, who's got a Substack, released the full manifesto. He was able to obtain it without any provisos from PR people or anything like that from law enforcement, and just released the whole manifesto for people to read. And people kind of read it and came away from it feeling like, he doesn't seem crazy to me. Like, it seems like he had a lot of problems with the system. Many were justified. He's not an expert. He's a 26-year-old kid. But like, definitely not like the rantings of a crazy person smearing a manifesto and shit. Like, was definitely not the kind of thing that the media was making it out to be, if that makes sense. Yeah. So there was a very weird piece of video from I forget which network it was, but this where they're basically so they know this television network, they know that they're watching them live in the prison, and they're asking questions to the prison inmates in the prison. Maybe I'll actually just play it for you because it's so fucking bizarre, where they're like trying to get responses back and forth through the TV, and like the prison inmates are like yelling out the window to the news cameras. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen on television. Yeah.
Now just east of Altoona, Pennsylvania, Luigi Mangione's home tonight, and until he makes the trip back to New York City and presumably a lengthy stay at Rikers. That's News Nation's correspondent Alex Capriello standing by to do the big report for us tonight. So some interesting interaction you had with the inmates from over the chain link. Tell me about it, Alex.
Yeah, pretty unbelievable moment. And Ashley, I can tell you at this very moment, I can look over my left shoulder up at the top of this prison wall, see through a window and see that your face is right there. They're watching Banfield at this exact moment as they promised they would. All right, so let's backtrack a little bit, okay? So earlier today, I was reporting outside this prison wall. So, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if you just heard that, Ashley. That was them screaming.
She's waving in that chair.
Alex, I just waved, and that was the...
Can you hear that?
Hi, guys. Say hello to Alex Capriello.
They said, we got you, Alex. Ashley says hello.
I can't believe this. Does Luigi have television in his single cell?
Oh, what?
No.
Unreal. They said no, right?
Oh my god! Okay,
So
we get the
she's-
idea.
they're literally
that is
like-
wild.
she's literally
Yeah,
asking
she
questions.
is
There's like
asking prisoners
the
essentially
questions,
saying
and then
it
the
into a
prisoners are
television,
yelling over the
yelling.
fence as to what's like being asked of them on
They've
TV.
obviously
It's so weird.
They've obviously just thrown the rundown out and just gone with that as well, which is
Surely it
hilarious.
is.
That's great TV.
live
It's great TV.
Yeah, that's great television.
I would buy a shitload of Colgate in the commercials between that television.
Wonder what the legality around that is. Because, like, you know, getting in visitation to talk to anyone who's in the prison system is a whole thing and a process. Like, you know, I've visited institutions like that. Like, yeah, you've got to be vetted and all that. So, yeah,
Doesn't
just
mean
to be
you
able to
can't yell at someone out in the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
that's what I mean. Just circumvent that and be like, well, we're broadcasting into the building, and then they can shout out. Like,
Now it's very
wow.
important
Well, the
as part of
guards are
the
like,
terms
okay.
and conditions that you obey the terms and conditions of the prison. You may not give interviews unless, of course, you can yell real loud. In which case, like, all bets are off. Like, go for your life, I suppose.
Something I saw someone point out about this whole situation with like the arrest of Mr. Mangione was that they were like, is this one of the earliest instances of having like a Gen Z or like a Gen Z sort of high profile arrest kind of like this? So the digital footprint is insane for this person, and there was so much that people could like we were talking about before, and people being very online, but that people could comb through. And
No, they're going through his Goodreads.
Yes, they went through his Goodreads
reviews and like, oh, he gave 4 stars to Ted Kaczynski's.
4 out of 5 to the Unabomber's manifesto. Yeah,
I was going to
4
make a
out of
joke about the Unabomber in about 5 minutes, but anyway, that's hilarious.
He had like
4 out of 5, pretty good, but not incredible, you know.
Yeah, and he had a review on it that like, and he said, I'll quote from it. He said, a take I found online that I think is interesting was that had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, and at the end of the day, he's probably right. So yeah, just some interesting little pull quotes.
It is interesting how like the glee that's been experienced in some corners of the internet. Like we said on the podcast last week, like obviously we don't advocate murder, but like have to be doing your level best to like bury your head in the sand to not understand where all of this has come from. Like the American healthcare system is an absolute morass. Dealing with these insurance companies is incredibly painful, like for the purposes of maximizing profit and returning value to shareholders at the expense of people and their lives. Like if you don't understand why people are mad about that, you are not paying attention. And I don't know. I think there's been a response from a lot of institutionalists to kind of like discredit the anger and be like, oh, see, they're pleased about someone dying, so we can just write off, like, you know, in full all of their concerns about the American healthcare system. And you kind of want to go like, no. Like the American healthcare system is still absolutely fucked, and we can level that criticism without, you know, celebrating murder per se. It's weird. The internet is weird. It is a strange time to be alive where you could just like backtrack through an assassin's like Goodreads history. You know, it's like, what did he think about the Lorax? Like, it's just a strange thing.
I think actually I don't use Goodreads. I don't have an account, but I thought you can either like quotes from things or like show, like, I don't know, or like have like quotes associated.
I'm sure you
with
can have
your
quotes up, yeah.
Whatever. And I think one of the ones that he liked was from the Lorax.
Oh, that's why I mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, which is obviously like, if you're actually paying attention, a kind of an anti-capitalist screed from Dr. Seuss about the, you know, the effects of like, you know, completely avarice, you know, consumerism, right? It's bizarre, and I think a lot of people aren't. Yeah, I don't know. I would obviously we're an anti-murder podcast. Have it noted, not pro-murder, but there's a lot of like really genuine grief and anger and rage out there, and I think it has to tie into like the Trump phenomenon and, you know, people's anger with the status quo. Like, I don't think any of those things are unrelated. Like the fact that they elected a bomb thrower.
100%.
The fact that they elected a metaphorical bomb thrower to the presidency And this kind of like populist anger and resentment about what's happening in people's lives and their ability to pay for themselves and have healthcare, like those things have to be linked, right? Like I don't think it's an unrelated phenomenon.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we mentioned it in the podcast last week. It's part of the same zeitgeist. There's a mass dissatisfaction with the ruling system as it is and the institutions, and this is part of it. It's just interesting that that the same people that are saying, down with the institutions are also people that are electing that elected a guy who's like part of the institutional,
who is the most swampiest swamp monster that ever roamed the earth. Yeah, it is interesting. Well, just because people are anti-institution doesn't mean that they necessarily do their best in terms of like voting for their self-interest, right? Like that's why populists and authoritarians are dangerous, is because they capitalize on people's anger in a way that grants them maximal political power. Now, what they do with that political power is then another story. They might choose to turn around and help people out with it and alleviate their problems. But you'll notice that this week in Trump's interviews, he's been pivoting away from the groceries, making groceries less expensive type stuff, and has been talking about things that he's a little bit more comfortable with, like migrants and things like that. Like he's very much, basically a journalist asked him like, oh, so what are you going to do about the grocery stuff? And he's like, well, it's hard to lower things. And once they're up, it's hard for them to come down. And we'll see if we can do something about it. Maybe we'll do something about it. I'll do my best. Like,
we're going to try and do something about it. And I thought they said, so you can't guarantee? It's like, no, I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee tomorrow.
Which is an oddly existential point for a man who has no soul.
Well, and like an oddly existential point, and also meaning, wait, but that means something different coming from the person who's going to be elected the most powerful man in the world, because like you could guarantee there's no tomorrow.
Well, yeah,
like,
see, it does have his finger on the button.
You could start nuclear Armageddon. Like if anyone can guarantee there's a tomorrow, it's you.
Or not. Yeah, it's just a bizarre moment to be alive, right? Like it's just a strange thing that's happening.
Yeah.
I look back in 20 years and go, what were you doing there, Daddy? And I was like, well, I was doing a podcast, son.
Yeah. And presumably in 20 years we'll be, with fingerless gloves, surrounding a bin fire after the fall of civilization, where I have to explain like the internet and roads and civil society and all these sorts of things. Yeah, the elites, which is
you'll have to.
You're eating one of those for dinner, son, as he gnaws on the leg of an elite. Yeah.
No, we'll have to give our 4 out of 5 reviews of the Unabomber's manifesto in person in this post-apocalyptic future.
I don't know. Sounds nice.
An oral history.
Oral history of the Unabomber.
Iliad. Speaking of tomorrow, though, so Syria is waking up to a new tomorrow. Obviously, we spoke last week about the fall of the Assad regime. He has now since taken what do they call it? Asylum in Russia.
Now, if I were Bashar al-Assad, I would do my level best to stay on the ground floor of buildings, stay away from windows, stay away from underwear, stay away from cups of tea, definitely stay away from plutonium. Just make sure you're being safe, Bashar, because Russia is not a friendly place for people who've pissed off Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
So it's been a busy week. So the HDF have sort of consolidated power, mostly in the south now, and have formed an interim government. Including some of Assad's former cabinet ministers as well. And they're trying to sort of.
That's a tense office.
It's a tense office. You could see the press conference. They were all just like staring across the table from each other, like, "Hey,
love it, unity government for the win."
Yeah, that's wow. Oh, those are some stressful days at work.
So they're sort of saying it's an interim government. They're going to work out what to do, and there's that sort of story is developing. But at the same time, there's been a whole heap of shit happening in the rest of the country. So Israel saw this happen and went, great, and so they decided to just expand further into the Golan Heights, which is already an occupied territory. And they decided to go past the demilitarized zone and just take a little bit more of it, and then proceeded to bomb several hundred Syrian, what were allegedly, empty hardware military targets around Syria. And I'm sure they probably caused a couple of casualties, but they just, they saw a truck from the former Assad regime, they decided to bomb it, right? They took out half of Syria's navy, which probably wasn't much to begin with, but, like striking large amounts of large infrastructure, military infrastructure targets. Allegedly this is the reason why they're doing it, is because they want to, because the people that have just taken over are technically jihadis, and jihadis don't really like Israel historically.
Yeah, from our list yet last week of all the people involved with interests in the area, I thought Israel was more interested in al-Assad being in power than anyone else.
Well, they were quite happy. Yeah, they're quite happy now to basically get on the front foot. And it's the whole argument of like Israel's got a right to defend itself, even if that means if we premeditate the premeditation of the premeditation and we 4D chess it and we just bomb everything because of fear, basically.
If you're doing it preemptively, it doesn't really count as self-defense. I don't mean to like.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's rhetoric that no one quite understands when they say that, but it's used quite often. So at the moment, Israel's, they're saying they're temporarily going to hold this part of the Golan Heights, which is basically, Syria's border with Israel. They've basically, and they're winding down air operations. So they've basically taken out the offensive capability, I guess, of, like it's not going to be like the Taliban where they just sort of rocked up and took over all the US administration's material. So in theory, there shouldn't be as much stuff there to potentially threaten Israel, right?
Yeah.
But they're still sitting
from like a military strategy perspective. It makes sense. Like if you've got a situation where one of your biggest adversaries is like got their pants down and is completely defenseless. You go, okay, well, we're going to take out a bunch of your military installations, like just in case. We don't know who these new guys are coming in. We're just going to make sure that you guys, haven't got anything up your sleeves. While the transition is happening and everyone's getting turfed out and the whole country's in turmoil, we're just going to bomb a couple of places. And then that way we can be certain that you're not going to bomb us in 2 weeks, right? Like I get it.
Several hundred.
I think it was like 350 locations last I saw.
It was a lot, yeah. So anyway, they're saying they're temporarily going to hold the Golan Heights buffer zone, but now they're just still sitting there, as far as I'm aware.
They've been holding the Golan Heights since when? Since the mid 80s,
60s,
mid 60s. So that is like technically a temporary sort of situation in and of itself that they're not supposed to be doing. So
it's temporary until it ends. So
70s. Sorry, 1970s was the agreement.
There you go.
Ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, the SDF, which is the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are mostly Kurdish but also include a number of Arab allies, they have been fighting another group, which is like the Syrian National Army, which is not actually the National Army. It's like, I might have stuffed up the name there. There's another group up the north, which is sponsored by Turkey. They've been like fighting those guys in the north. And then, I don't know, I guess now the SDF, they're kind of on the outer. They've got to try and sort of work with the interim government to sort of, I guess, try not to like get pushed out of existence.
The leader of HDS seems to be saying, I think his name is Jalali or something like that.
Jalali, yeah.
I heard some excerpts from an interview where he was talking about, people are saying he's saying all the right things in terms of having like a, multi-ethnic, multiracial. We're not going to go and start hunting anyone down and killing anyone.
There have been
reprisals though, like people that have been involved in the Assad regime that people have been, let's say, improvising with and taking situations into their own hands. But it's like the argument that he's making from HTS's perspective is, yes, we're going to be in charge, but no, we're not going to have like recriminations and that sort of thing. Like we don't want our country to descend into an endless cycle of violence. Now that's what they're saying. As to whether that is actually what occurs is another story. But
there hasn't been any. There've been individual reports. There hasn't been, as far as we can tell, any sort of large scale breaches of any sort of ceasefires. There's been sort of sporadic clashes in the north, that kind of thing. But we'll see. The other big news is that Russia looks like it's going to pull out of Syria altogether. They're currently winding up their air force bases and their naval bases. And
which
moving ships.
Putin would be pissed about that because Syria was basically their entryway into the Middle East. So I just imagine the conversation with Putin and Bashar al-Assad would have gone something like, you had one job, buddy. You had one job, which was to make sure your government doesn't fall. We've had this conversation. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
it affects their power projection into Africa as well.
Yeah.
So that was an important stopping point on any flights.
On an unrelated note, would you like some tea?
With less Novichok.
Yeah. I think the real winner out of this is Turkey. Turkey's now Erdogan, effectively seems to have backed HTS. So you can see, we commented last week, this happened really quickly. We don't sort of see where this don't know where this came from. It seems to be like a Turkish sort of sponsored operation.
Turkey seems definitely to be heavily involved.
And so now Erdogan's basically kingmaker, right, of this region. And
it means he can kind of do what he wants to do with the Kurds, which is what he's wanted all along. There's a lot of upsides for the Turkish government in how this is all seems to be shaking out. So,
and it's weird because in the north, I think I'm pretty sure it was the Syrian National Army is the group, but I could be wrong with the acronym. But so they're a Turkish-backed group. They're fighting the SDF, which is US-backed. The US was sending them heaps of stuff to try and fight ISIS. So the SDF's now sort of said, well, we can't really focus on ISIS right now because we've got to deal with everything else that's happening. So the US then went and bombed 75 suspected ISIS targets in the sort of east of Syria.
Everyone's getting it in this week. That's the Israelis are bombing, the US is bombing. I think I saw someone Turkey has been bombing stuff as well. Yeah,
it's kind of insane. It's still developing. But,
Fuck.
I think if there's one thing we can all agree on is that Bashar al-Assad is a gigantic piece of shit, and I can't wait to see what this fancy optometrist clinic that he's going to be opening in Russia is going to look like. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I did get it. You go, Tom.
Oh, I was going to say, I can't wait to see him all bearded up and skateboarding around the
around the Kremlin
with his around the Kremlin with his cat like Julian Assange.
Hey fellow kids, what's going on here?
Yeah,
it's me, definitely not Bashar al-Assad. Yeah, the guy's a gigantic piece of shit, and his family has been ruling Syria with an iron fist for 54 years. And the stories about the prison, the gulags and people emerging from these prisons, prisoners of war, with kids that were born and raised inside these prisons. It's just like a grotesque, disgusting regime that's coming to an end. And obviously you got to be pleased about that. But as to what's next, we're just going to have to wait and see.
Speaking of horrible families, the US court has ruled against Rupert Murdoch's bid to change his family trust to consolidate control of his media empire in the hands of his son Lachlan. So we reported on this several months ago now. Basically, Lachlan and Rupert were trying to change the trust so that Lachlan would have sort of control of the various companies and the various entities that sit within it, and in effect, by doing so, maintain the conservative viewpoint that these organisations have. Now, there are 4 children of the Murdoch family: Lachlan, James, Elizabeth, and Prudence. You don't really hear too much about Elizabeth and Prudence, mostly around Lachlan and James, but there has been publicly, a fallout between James and Lachlan and Elizabeth as well. So they actually put out a statement after this whole thing, saying that they're happy that it's over and the family can now start to heal, so to speak. But apparently they are going to launch.
They vowed to appeal, so no healing just yet. I don't understand. Rupert Murdoch is in his 90s now at this stage. Yeah. The thing I really don't understand about this is that the trust was created essentially for the purposes of passing down power from Rupert to his four children in a way that preserved each of their, autonomy and wishes. And the idea was that they were supposed to be responsible stewards of his empire going forward, that he would, by passing along the power in this way, would respect the autonomy of all of the participants, and they would be forced to work together in order to come to the best solution. And basically the majority of the kids said, okay, well, we want to turn Fox News into not a right-wing propaganda shit machine. And Rupert said, oh, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and control this from the grave. And that's why they've launched this legal action. But it's surely you understand Like, unless, cryogenics comes a long way in a short amount of time, you are going to die and you will not be around at some point. Like, don't you want to leave your family in a position where they like work together and are in each other's lives and love each other? And like, is that not what, like, I watch Succession. I get it. Like, the answer is no, obviously, but like, he's a gigantic megalomaniacal piece of shit. Yeah. But like, it strikes me like from a family dynamics perspective, shouldn't your objective as a father to be like, I want to set my kids up for the success in the sense that they are provided for, but they also need to rely on each other and work together in order to achieve the best ends for the empire going forward? Like, it doesn't seem sensical to me to be like, yeah, fight over my corpse, bitches. Like,
yeah, well, but George, you see, your heart isn't like a giant black hole,
right?
Of like that, where all good things go to die. Although I love black holes, so I think that's disingenuous to black holes. I think they're very beautiful phenomena. So I apologize for the comparison, but no. I think
two black holes.
Yeah, two black holes. Being compared to Rupert Murdoch. But no, I think. I think maybe what we're forgetting in that analogy about wanting the best for your children sort of in your future is that this big evil conservative empire that he's created is his true child.
Yeah, the Death Star is the real child. You're right. Yeah. It is just bizarre though. Like,
Did you guys read the last part of this article?
Yes. And it's fantastic. Like, yeah.
So the court ruling revealed that his children started discussing a PR strategy for his death in April last year, prompted by an episode of Succession, a TV drama about a media mogul and his frequently feuding children, who is in no way related to Rupert Murdoch. It prompted Elizabeth's representative on the trust to write a succession memo aimed at avoiding the chaos depicted on the show after the death of the fictional patriarch, according to court documents seen by the Times.
And it was not successful.
It did not work.
No. Yes. And thank you, ABC, spoiling some parts of Succession. But I just think that's amazing in that, so much of Succession, like, they're always saying the entire time, like, no, it's not about the Murdochs. What are you talking about? It was like, no, clearly we are commenting on the Murdochs.
Yeah, even the Murdochs are watching it going, this is about us.
Yeah.
that is a terrible idea. I should do something about that.
Like, it's always like so much of what the Murdochs do like was influencing the show because like they're obviously trying to sort of talk about it there. And I remember, wasn't it part of one of the divorces for Rupert Murdoch was that the ex-wife was not allowed to talk to the writers of Succession about anything. But I think this is the first time I've seen the events of the show influencing the Murdochs.
Real life, yeah. It is so funny.
Is crazy.
It is so funny though, because it's like, I just imagine like a Lachlan Murdoch watching Succession and having the same thing, thoughts and feelings that we all have about it. Just be like, oh, these guys are such a bunch of overprivileged assholes. Like, all these suck. He's just sitting there going, oh, God, Kendall sucks. I'm like, Kendall's you, mate. You are Kendall. He's based on you.
Yeah, you are Kendall. Fucking.
It's like you're so close to getting it.
You're rapping at your father's birthday.
Yes.
Did Lachlan ever rap at his father's birthday?
I don't know. That's apocryphal. I don't know if that actually happened.
Interesting.
I doubt that happened. But also, I'm just glad that episode of television spoke to them clearly, because it is one of the best episodes of TV I think I've ever watched. So, we share that in common.
Speaking of things that are not shared in common, and speaking of black holes, Peter Dutton's had a week from hell, or a good week. I don't know. It depends which way you look at it and who's spinning the narrative, to be honest.
A week from hell.
I apologize to black holes to be compared to Peter Dutton.
A week from hell, but given that's where Peter Dutton resides in his off hours, that seems pretty luxurious, given that he's the Prince of Darkness. So
the spin has, from the Liberal Party this week, has been, and from conservative media as well, has been pretty strong in Australia. Start off with the lead headline we've got here is that after promising to cut migration extensively in sort of, I guess in opposition to in opposition and also like agreeance to some extent to the Labor's policy, which didn't get up around
international student caps.
Yeah, correct. So they said they wanted to cut net migration to 160,000,
which is down from something like 500 and something thousand. So a pretty substantial cut. And basically what happened is the business community and a bunch of CEOs went, hey, buddy, hey, that's going to ruin everything. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since that time, obviously the next sort of quarter's figures have come out and it shows that, basically Australia's growth only edged forward because of migration.
Yeah. Otherwise known as a per capita recession, basically, when the only reason you have any growth is because the amount of people increased into the country. It's what would otherwise be a recession, right?
That and government spending was the other reason why there's still technically growth. So, I mean, obviously they'd be looking at this going, well, we don't want to say we're going to cut migration if that's our one chance to potentially have any economic.
We want to throw a hand grenade into the economy. We don't want to throw a nuke into the economy. That'd be crazy.
Yeah. We still want to be back in black, and we've still got all these mugs. we need a budget.
How am I going to get rid of all of these back in black mugs? We ordered so many.
Yeah, we have so many of these fucking mugs, and we need that budget to be written in
They're
black.
Still left over from Joe Hockey. We are not moving units. This is part of the problem.
I'm sure you can get them at Canberra garage sales around the trade.
I would, no joke, I would love a back in black mug.
They should have them, I reckon, in the Parliament House gift shop. Like, they have so much stuff in the Parliament House gift shop, like just mugs of any Prime Minister you can name and all that
Loose
shit.
Onions, budgie smugglers, all sorts of stuff.
Give me budget merch, or I want one of the Border Force plushies.
Yes,
that they made. Like, can you make that?
They're so cute, so authoritarian, but so cute.
So cute. Please, and they're holding up my little teddy bear.
So Dutton said, walking everything back into the fence, over the fence, and into the abyss.
Like Homer Simpson backing away into so many hedges.
He said, we'll have a look at the economic settings when we come into government. Which is way of saying, we haven't got a policy.
Don't worry about it. Trust me. Just trust me.
Yeah. Obviously, the other things that have happened this week was the fallout from my brain just turned off. The synagogue.
Stuff?
No, well, there's also that. So the synagogue, terrorist attack, basically, is what they're calling it. And the Liberals were very strong on using it as a political point scoring thing against Labor, which, and there was a media narrative around that. I won't get into too many specifics, but that was something that I did not like from the coalition this week, was using this opportunity, this obviously very distressing incident as a blame Labor. Blame Labor
as a political football. This hate crime. We're just going to use it for our own political ends. That didn't really turn you on as a voter
for all this, and blame the Victorian government somehow. Is and people
bloody
are saying,
Dan Andrews. When's Dan Andrews going to learn? You know. Thanks, Dan.
Victorian government should have done more, or should have preempted this. But I don't quite know. Anyway, it's sort of like, I don't know what people are expecting, but it's been.
There's been more outrage over this burned building than there has been in the media about all of the 45,000 plus deaths in Gaza. To just as an interesting reference point, damaged property versus tens of thousands of people who have been essentially murdered. I don't know. That's of note. I think that's interesting. Obviously, it's not good to firebomb places of religious significance. Don't do that. Again, two things we could say about the Unnatural Selection Podcast: anti-murder, anti-hate crimes. But a little bit of perspective would not go astray, right?
Yeah, the narrative's been, it was, especially in the first few days, was breathless.
And absolutely just twisted for people's political gain.
Yeah.
It was,
they still haven't arrested anyone yet, although apparently the investigation is ongoing. And they've got the feds involved because it is classed as a terrorist attack, or a likely terrorist attack, sorry.
The Albo was quick to be like, yep, this is a terrorist attack.
Well, no, this is the thing, is that they're saying he wasn't quick enough, Tom. He wasn't quick enough to call it a terrorist attack. It took it took him 4 days to go and visit the synagogue. And
he was in WA on another, oh my God, who cares? It's so fucking stupid when we're getting drawn into it. It's so fucking dumb. Like, who cares if it took him 48 hours or 84 hours to go and visit the site? Like, it's just, the whole thing is so fucking ridiculous. Like,
absolutely beat up by the Murdoch media primarily. I messaged you guys the front page of the Herald Sun the other day when I was at my cafe. And it was just, it's a picture of Albanese visiting the site, getting heckled basically from all sides. They had to rush him into a car to get him out of there.
Who would want to be the fucking prime minister at this point? It seems like such a thankless, shitty, awful job. Like, who actually wants that role? Aside from Peter Dutton,
obviously. But like, I mean, obviously the media is partly at play here, but is partly at fault for this whole narrative.
Of course.
But it's been pushed. It's been pushed by the coalition.
Yeah.
Now, the local member, whose name I've forgotten now, Tom...
Josh Burns?
Josh Burns, thank you very much. He wanted to speak at the rally that was held the day afterwards, or maybe a day or two afterwards. He lost his voice. He couldn't speak. He asked Senator James Patterson, hey, could you please read this statement for me? James Patterson was going to do it. Dutton rocked up and was like, no fucking way, ripped it out of his hands and made there was another representative there who did the speech for him. But it goes to show, right, this is not, Josh Burns was there, right? He literally had lost his voice. And all he was asking was, in this moment of like, we could have some sort of political
unity.
Yeah,
and Peter Dutton saw that and said, absolutely fucking not. I need to score some political points off this. Thank you very much.
And if you need to know anything about Peter Dutton, that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know, is that he saw the site of a fucking alleged terrorist attack and where there was, a rally for community healing. And he decided very deliberately to make it a political point scoring campaign.
Not one of our guys will read your statement.
Yet has the mind-bending audacity to then turn around and say that Anthony Albanese is a divisive political figure. It's just like,
oh my God,
mate, I think irony might collapse. If you say that 3 times, Beetlejuice might appear. Like, you are breaking the universe. Shut up.
And speaking of divisive craziness from Peter Dutton, the announcement that he made this week, again, he's weak from hell, where he said that if he's elected Prime Minister, he won't stand in front of the Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander flags at press conferences.
Just crazy. What a crazy thing to say.
People were asking him about that, and his reasoning was how could we be a united country if there's more than one flag that we stand under? Like, in the name of not being divisive, I choose to not be inclusive. Essentially, it was fucking insane. I was like,
it's
what
like
a hill to die on.
Well, it just reminded me of all his bullshit rhetoric around The Voice, saying like, "Oh, the reason I didn't, go to and attend the apology in Parliament is because it divides us, and the reason I don't support the Voice to Parliament is because it doesn't do enough for Aboriginal people." It's just, you just realize how hollow and nonsensical and bullshit his entire approach is when you realize, like, he refuses to be pictured with the Aboriginal flag. This guy, it's not clever. There doesn't have to be any like 12D chess around it. He's just a fucking racist. That's all there is to it. He's just a racist piece of shit. And he wants to divide people and use it as a way of enabling himself to get into power. Like, there's nothing creative. There's no like 12, there's no extra elements to it that might make it that might make it explainable or rationalizable. Like, the guy's just a fucking racist prick. Like, that's all there is to it.
Sprinkle some allegedly through there.
Allegedly. He's allegedly a gigantic piece of shit.
Final piece of the news this week was the CSIRO, when they released their appraisal of the Liberals' nuclear plan several months ago now.
Great.
They said it was
CSIRO. Just big thumbs up. Yeah, nice one. Go for it. Get at it.
No, they said it was a big steaming pile of shit.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
They copped some criticism from Conservative members and certain sections of the scientific community because they didn't take into effect certain factors like construction and other bits and pieces that would make it, and how long does it take, to construct power lines for renewable energy? Like, you haven't included those in the balance costs, right? In terms of comparing apples with oranges and all that kind of shit. Anyway, so
what about all the plushies that we have to make?
Exactly.
Think about all the merch.
It's at least 2% of the budget. So they went ahead and they went, you know what, we're scientists, we'll take those considerations on board and we'll redo the numbers. And so they did that. They released it, funnily enough, the same week that the Liberals were going to announce some more details, the costings of the nuclear plan. And they still said,
how's that timing?
Stacks up like a big pile of shit.
I believe it would cost twice as much to do the nuclear plan as it would to focus on renewables.
I'm sorry, we've just been
the summary.
Just been crunching some more numbers. Sorry, just give me a second. Let's carry the trillion, and it's still a bunch of bullshit. It's still a dog shit bullshit plan. We're meant to trust. I think I saw it as a Batuta headline said something to the effect of like government who couldn't build fucking car parks meant to be entrusted with building nuclear facilities. It's just like, that is 100% on point. Yeah. These guys couldn't put up CCTV cameras for the community, whatever it was, community safety program that they botched and spent all this money in, ways that were politically advantageous to them. They couldn't put up a bunch of fucking CCTV cameras properly. We're meant to trust them with nuclear infrastructure. Okay, buddy.
And so I think they released their costings, and we haven't actually got an article describing what they are. I think it was in the trillions of dollars. There's still not a heap of detail as far as I'm aware in those, but a quick Google search, you'll be able to find out what they announced, and I'm sure we might comment more on that perhaps next week.
I mean, who cares what it's gonna cost, because it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. So it's like, well, you know what? Round it up to 3 trillion. I reckon. Who fucking cares? It's not gonna happen.
We never said
elected.
Trump
You're saying they'll never do it.
We never said Trump was going to be elected like 8 years ago, and it happened.
Oh, no.
So
I'm not saying they're not going to get elected. I think they probably might get elected in the way we're currently trending. But I'm just saying this whole area is such a fucking morass, like a Byzantine fucking maze of complexity that it'll just never happen, right? Like, it's just not going to it's a thing that cannot happen.
We need a Department of Government Efficiency.
That's what we need. We need a Doge. That's it. Mm-hmm. We need a bunch of morons with a bunch of rulers just crossing things out. That'll solve it. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that do, or ever will exist at our handle, at Unnatural Show. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me down to the Murdoch Family Trust, where I'll be trying to see if I can just sort of insert myself into there, like so many Gregs in the TV show Succession.
Well, you know what they say. You gotta make an omelet. You gotta break a couple of Gregs. Thanks for listening, guys.
Can't make a tomlet without breaking a few Gregs.
That's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
That was honestly one of my, I heard that line in Succession and I just clapped in the living room. I was like, well done.
It's like, just like Ray Fiennes, just that gif of him just like clapping in Schindler's List. Just
so
delightful.
Good.